So be your own advocate. Every therapist is not a one size fits all. If
Right.
one doesn't work for you, then go find someone else. Because there is a therapist out there that will make you their priority and will help you with those challenging moments or traumas that you've been through. And they want to help you on your healing journey.
Yeah. I'm going to dumb it down to a pair of pants. Not all pants are going to fit you,
No.
but there are pants out there that will fit
Yes.
you. Yeah. And I can't wait to read the comments about that. Welcome to Break That Cycle, where we help you turn your obstacles into opportunities. I'm your host, Bill Cheney, and I am here with a global celebrity. Yes, I said it, and I'll die on that hill, Christy. Okay. Christy is here with us, and I say global celebrity because you actually have an interesting introduction into your, I guess, a afterduction of things that you have been through, but you have won 3 pageant competitions.
I have.
Yes. Most recently was Miss Universal, which is in 2020?
2019, 2020, yep.
Okay. How was the pageant experience? Because the only experience I have with it is watching the clips of the crazy moms with pageant girls. And that's all I think about when I think about pageantry. So please enlighten, because I'm sure it's not all that.
Just with anything in life, you see the glamorous and, the beautiful women. And I was lucky and fortunate enough to just compete in the pageant for a couple of years. And there is a little bit of cattiness, and you still have your mean girls, mean women, that are very much on the comparison and jealousy side. But more so than that is just a group of women that just empower one another and support one another. And it is just so incredible to be surrounded by so many like women that are all have a passion and a mission and are all just want to do better, whether it's, world hunger or children, cancer, sexual assault. So it's very empowering to be in a room with so many women all working towards a greater purpose in themselves.
And during your campaign over your first pageant you were coaching for a little while, weren't you?
So the coaching came later. My first pageant was in 2015.
Okay.
And I was actually recently out of the military. I was pregnant with our first son. And
it's perfect time to sign up for a pageant, right?
Why not?
Yeah.
I was 6 months pregnant. I was going through my bachelor's program, and I just was at home flipping through the channels. And like you mentioned, those shows with, moms and pageant little kids popped on the TV. And I thought, you know what? I've never done a pageant. That should be fun.
Yeah.
And I looked it up. At the time we were stationed in North Carolina because my husband was still in the military. And I came across the Miss North Carolina America pageant. And I submitted my application. Didn't think anything of it. And 3 months later, when I was as big as a house, due a week later, I get a text message from the director that says, check your email.
You're in.
Exactly. And when I opened the email, I said, congratulations, we want you to be a delegate for Miss North Carolina America.
Wow.
And I remember calling the director and telling her, I think you have the wrong girl. She said, are you not Christy Hennett? I said, yeah, but I'm due next week with our first son. And she says, it's okay. The pageant's in 4 months.
Yeah, it's easy to shed that baby weight in 4 months, right? Yeah, sure.
And I said, you want me to be in a 2-piece on stage? She said, yes, ma'am. I said, all right, challenge accepted.
Nice.
And so that was my first pageant experience. I competed against 17 amazing women.
Yeah.
And long story short, I took away the title of Miss North Carolina America 2025 or 2015.
Nice. And then along the way, you had gotten some advice for what is it called for like your mission, your platform. So for your platform, you were given some advice to lean in a different direction because previously you were going for veterans and veteran support. And then you were told to make a switch, correct?
Yes.
What was that switch?
So that switch was sexual assault awareness, being a voice for the voiceless. I myself am a survivor of sexual assault, and that had always been on my heart. But that's risky. You know, that means that I had to open up and be vulnerable and share my story on a very public platform
Yeah.
to the world. And in that time, I still hadn't shared it with my family.
Mm.
So I had to kind of figure out what my next moves were. And I took that big risk and I shared it with my family probably a month later.
Yeah.
And then the rest is history, as they say.
And I do want to go back to the history, but you told me your family said something that I thought was absolutely amazing when you finally told them your story.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going into telling your story, as most people do, nervous because you think someone may have a negative reaction, may not take you seriously, may not believe what you're saying, may try to blame you for what had happened.
Mm-hmm.
And what did they say to you?
Why did you keep this in for so long and go through all these years with this by yourself?
Yeah.
And it was truly like it lifted so much weight off my shoulder because you're right, Bill. It's the judgment, and I should have known better. I was raised to, not put yourself in those situations. And then I did. And so the shame and the guilt, and I'm going to let them down or disappoint them, weighed heavily throughout the years. And it just got worse, I feel, as the years went by.
Mm-hmm.
And after telling them in 2019, it was almost like I could breathe again.
Mm.
And then you start thinking, they're right. Like, why did I go this long without sharing this with them?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I love that. And that, I mean, that's a mark of a real understanding family. And I think that's fantastic. If you don't mind though, if you don't mind sharing your story, I would like to go back to when the trauma happened initially.
Yeah. So I'm going to take it back a little bit further. So I am a first generation American. My grandparents came over from Cuba when my mom was 3. So me and my cousins are, that first generation Americans here. And so with that, I was also the first one to ever join the military in my family. And I made that decision probably around when I was 16. I knew that, I wanted a future and I wanted to move away from home, but I also wanted to attend college, and there just wasn't any funding or anything that was saved up. So the military was kind of the
knocking
safe
at
choice.
your door.
Yep.
Hey, come this way.
Yep. And it sounded appealing. And I said, why not? So I signed my contract when I was actually 17. I had to have my mom sign the consent form. And then a couple months after my graduation, I shipped out. So I went through basic training, the 9 weeks. And then after basic training in the military, we have AIT, your job training. I signed up for human resource and I finished that. No problem. I was scheduled to fly home the next day. And so I checked out of base because once you were done, they let you check out. You could check in a hotel and just find a way to the airport. And so I did that. I checked into a local Days Inn and walked across the street. And there was a mall and a McDonald's right there. I grabbed breakfast because, here's 18 weeks of not eating any junk food.
Yeah, it's perfect time.
So as a young soldier, you're like, yes. And I was eating breakfast. I remember thinking, wow, I finally made it on my own.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that thought because growing up in a Hispanic household, you grow up, it's very strict and structured, and there's a lot of set values and skills. And so sometimes it becomes a little bit overpowering because you feel like you're not doing anything on your own because it's always, what is everyone telling you?
Yep.
But in that moment, I felt that I had made it. And unfortunately, within 3 hours, my entire world shattered. After I had breakfast, I walked across the parking lot. There was a mall there and I walked in. The mall wasn't open yet, but the doors were.
Yeah.
So I just walked in, walked out, saw the times, and was going to walk back to the hotel. As I was walking out of the mall, there was a man that followed me and he said, "Oh, hey, what time does that open?" I said, "Oh, it's right here." He asked me 3 times if I wanted a ride. The first 2 times I said, "Nope, I'm good. I'm right across the street." And the third time, being young and naive and thinking that nothing bad's going to happen to me. That stuff doesn't happen here. It's just things that you watch on the news.
Yeah.
I got in the car with them. This was right around Valentine's Day time or Valentine's. So he mentioned, "Hey, do you mind if we go to, Walgreens? I want to get something for my mom and sister." Sure. When we were done, he went to take me back to my hotel. And as I was getting out of the car, he said, "Do you mind if I come up?" And again, not thinking.
Yeah.
I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So he came up, went to use the bathroom. He had bought a bottle of Coke. And again, young soldier, 18 weeks of, no junk food. He's like,
Yeah.
you want some? Without my knowledge, he had put something in my soda. And next thing you know, I was being pushed down on the bed and I was going in and out of consciousness, and he was getting up from being on top of me. He left the room, and somehow in that moment, I had text one of my battle buddies. So in the military, that's, someone that you kind of go through boot camp.
Right.
And is there for you. And she got to the hotel. The door was locked. She got management. And next thing you know, I just hear them banging on the door. And then the cops are busting through the door.
Yeah.
Ambulance is there. So from there, it was just a whirlwind. I went to the hospital. I did a rape kit. There was a police report filed. And after that, after I got released hours later from the hospital, I went back to the same hotel. They ended up moving me rooms, so they put me on a higher floor. But Days Inn are just very much like outside hotels.
Right.
So I remember talking to two battle buddies outside on the balcony area, and I saw the guy coming up the stairs.
Oh, wow.
And one of those battle buddies was a male, so I told them. They pushed me in the room, and they went after him.
Yeah.
But the guy got away. I had both of those battle buddies, a male and female soldier, stay with me that night.
Yeah.
The next morning, they went downstairs to get breakfast in the lobby, and the guy saw them again, and they called the cops. But again, the guy was gone by then.
Yeah.
So I remember that night of the rape, just sitting in the shower and just feeling like my world completely just shattered. And I was supposed to get on a plane the next day and fly home to my grandparents and my mom, because I lived with my grandparents and my mom, and knowing that there was no way in this world that I could tell them.
Yeah.
Because after going home and being home for those 2 weeks that I was going to, I was getting shipped to the other side of the world, and my first duty station was Germany.
Okay.
So now, how can I tell them that their little girl just got raped, and then I'm also leaving?
And then get shipped out.
So I begged my recruiter. I called him. I did tell him. I begged him not to say anything, and he promised me that he wouldn't.
Yeah.
And so I got on a plane the next day and pushed everything down and suppressed it and kind of toughened out the next 2 weeks. And 2 weeks later, I was on a plane to Germany.
So, one, I hope my daughter watches this. Don't get in the car with any strangers.
Yes.
This is why we say it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're, we're not always thinking clearly. And especially coming out of boot camp.
Yes.
Like, bring on the world. I can
Mm-hmm.
handle anything. Like you had said, you think you can handle that. And it wasn't a physical brute force type thing. It was very clever.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly somebody who'd done this before.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So you mentioned trying to suppress all of those feelings. Anyone that I have conversations with that try to suppress trauma, we all like to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So can I add you to the list?
Sure. By all means.
Yeah. All right. So what was your method of suppression of the trauma?
So those 2 weeks that I went home, I went home for hometown recruiting. Back then, when you were done, especially if you were still in high school, graduated, went to the military, you came back for 2 weeks.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
And helped the recruiters. You essentially were, like their bait to go back into high school and try to recruit all your friends.
Go tell everyone how cool it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. I need to meet my quota. Yeah.
Yes. So I was in their office every single day and just kind of got myself super busy. And in that moment, I think I was just very much still in shock. Now, when I look back through this lens of trauma and being more trauma informed, I could see what was happening. But in that moment, in that time, I was just surviving day to day.
Yeah.
And then so when I got to Germany, that was my first duty station. Here I am, 18 years old. And at 18 in Germany,
hey,
you could drink.
Let's have some fun.
You could drink. There is no drinking age over there.
Right.
So that was my method of suppressing it. I would get off work at 5 o'clock. By 5:30, I was downtown. We didn't have formation until 6:30 in the morning. So a lot of mornings I was rolling in between 5:30 a.m. and 6 a.m. And I was just drinking to numb any kind of pain that I was going through, erase those thoughts. And I knew that if I was out drinking, I wasn't sleeping. And if
Yeah.
I wasn't sleeping, I wasn't having nightmares.
Yep.
And so I did that probably for 2.5 months. And I thought, man, I really got this on the reps. Like, I'm doing good.
Yeah. Cracked life's code.
Yep.
Yeah.
I got it. I
Yeah.
figured it out. But sure enough, about 2.5 months later, I had a flashback, and it's like everything just happened all over again.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
This isn't going away.
That's really impressive, honestly. And I know, you may be a little disappointed in yourself for that 2 or 3 months that you were just drinking like a fish, but to have an episode where you have a flashback instead of, okay, well now I need to try drugs. Like the drinking isn't cutting it. I need more,
right?
Rather than actually identifying what the issue was really struck me as powerful when you first told me the story. I feel that most people will just progress to the next level. Mine started with the drinking, and it was progressively getting worse and worse. And I mean, I'd go to work every day with a hangover. It was almost normal. It was like, okay, ibuprofen will take care of that, whatever. I drank so that I could sleep. I would be at home. I would drink as much as I could, fall asleep in the living room, typically on my lazy boy chair. Most mornings I would wake up still in that chair and go get ready for work. But when I was highly intoxicated, going to sleep, passing out essentially, I didn't have those dreams.
Right.
So it was when I didn't have anything in my system is when I started having those really lucid dreams that would just creep the hell out of me. It was horrible. But I didn't get to the point where I said, oh, maybe I need to look into myself. That took me a long time to do that. So very impressive on your part to figure that out sooner. Did you take your own advice?
No.
I
mean, now when I go through and reflect on the steps that I took, I'm like, oh, I knew that I was in trouble, but all that happened then was I told my chain of command, hey, this is what happened when I left Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And so their solution was to put me on a plane and send me back to Fort Jackson. That's what they were offering me.
Okay.
I refused.
Yeah.
I did not want to go back to the place that just completely cracked open my world.
Right.
And when I told them that, then all of a sudden I became the black sheep in the unit. And they pretty much told me, if you don't want to go fly back, then we never want to hear about this again.
Holy shit.
So that happened, and I felt there was no support from the chain of command whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then it just got a little worse in the sense that I had an E7, a sergeant first class, that he preyed on younger girls, on younger soldiers. And so there was one time that we were in a small unit, and there was probably 30 of us. So we would go out to dinner together. Germany, the clubs, that was a Friday, Saturday thing.
Yeah.
And so even your supervisors would go out with you. It was just kind of, hey, we're all family. We're all getting through this together.
You're in a foreign country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we were at a club one day. I was walking out of the bathroom, and this sergeant first class cornered me and in a corner and pretty much was trying to get with me. And when I ducked to get under his arm, he said, come on, Diaz. He's like, this is how you like it.
Wow.
And so I said a couple choice words, and I walked out of there, and I went back to my barracks. And then from that moment on, anytime that he saw me, he would drop me and make me just do push-ups until he said, you're done. So being a young soldier in the military, here is a sergeant first class that outranks you. Here's the power. You don't know what you don't know when you're that young in the military. And so you don't think that you have options. And that went on for months until the unit deployed.
Wow.
And I would see him, and he would just drop me and make me do push-ups.
It's a shame that cowards like that can get that type of power and really hold it over someone with probably no merit whatsoever. I mean, in that situation, absolutely no merit. But just looking back at my time in the military, there were definitely some E7s, E8s that were dumber than a box of rocks and should not have been where they were.
Yeah.
But wow, that is quite heartbreaking. How were you able to move on from that? Where did life take you after that?
So after Germany, I actually got stationed in Fort Drum, New York. And I was with the EOD, so explosive ordnance disposal. So when I got to Fort Drum, they were actually already deployed. And then a few months later, I deployed by myself to meet the unit down there. So now I'm this female in a 40-man team in the military. And so, there's, unfortunately, I will always say it now, the military biggest, dirtiest secret is sexual harassment and sexual assault. And I stand 100% by that.
Okay.
And so you get a young female soldier in a male-dominant unit, and you constantly hear the remarks of the bets in the background, like, oh, I bet I could sleep with her first. Or I bet I'm going to get in her pants. And it's disgusting.
Yeah.
But it's very much reality.
Yeah.
And how the military operates.
Yeah.
And so I got downrange. There was a couple older senior, NCOs, sergeants in the military that kind of took me under the wing and saw me just as a daughter. So they would let me know, hey, these other guys, these are the bets, these are what they're saying. And so now I'm in Iraq, just kind of going through day-to-day life, not trying to think about anything that's happened. And it wasn't until one day for lunch, we were in the DFAC, the cafeteria, and another male soldier accidentally bumped into me.
Yeah.
And I just dropped my food tray and kind of lost it, for lack of better words.
Yeah.
Luckily, one of these sergeants was with me and said, hey, I got her. And from there, we went straight to mental health.
Yeah.
And so here we are, 2008, my assault happened in 2005, that I heard for the very first time you have chronic PTSD.
Yeah.
And it was bittersweet because all this time I knew that I felt like I was going crazy. I knew that there was something wrong, but I didn't know anything about trauma. I didn't know anything about PTSD. I felt the depression and the anxiety, which I had never had before. So I knew there was something wrong, but I couldn't pinpoint it. And so just hearing you have chronic PTSD, it was like a sigh of fresh air almost, because, okay, I know I'm not going crazy and there is a reason why all this is happening.
Wow. Yeah. No, that's, but it has to be almost a little weird. Was it weird to hear, or was it just completely empowering?
Oh no, it was weird to hear.
Yeah.
Because I didn't even know what that meant back then.
It wasn't as big of a thing as it is now.
Right.
Yeah. And what was your initial reaction? Was it more, I'm finally going to get some help? Or was it more, they're just trying to trip me up? Or like,
I guess my initial thought was, okay, I'm not crazy. I knew that there was something wrong with me.
Yeah.
So whether it was a label or whatever, it was just more for myself, that side of like, now I don't have to doubt myself because there is a name to whatever this is that I'm going through.
Sure.
Their recommendation was, once you redeploy back to Fort Drum, you need to start seeing counseling.
How would you rate the counseling?
On a scale, on
an abacus, how would you rate the counseling compared to what counseling measures you use today? It
was crap. Can I say that?
Yeah. Yeah, you can.
It was crap. I went through 7 therapists while I was in the military.
Jeez.
Ineffective. I remember sitting in on one session and they were a newer therapist. And back then, I didn't know what this book was, but in the mental health realm, it's called the DSM-5, and it's the Bible of all mental health illnesses. And I remember sitting in front of her, and for the first time in years, starting to open up and share my story. And it was almost as if I was a checklist, and she was just checking the blocks.
Wow.
So in that moment, I got up and I walked out because I didn't feel heard and I felt dismissed. And I went a couple more months and even years without effective therapy. So the drinking started again. Through that time, I got married to an EOD guy. And so now I'm still battling and wrestling with my PTSD. And then I marry this guy that is less than the Prince Charming. The emotional abuse was there, the mental abuse. And then at the time, I didn't realize that it was a thing, but marital rape it also occurred. So whenever we have trauma that's unaddressed and things get worse in your life, all of those symptoms just lay on the surface.
Yeah.
And so I was in a very dark place, very toxic relationship. I started having suicidal thoughts, and I thought that my only way to just end all this pain and suffering was to end my life.
Yeah.
And so ever since I was a young girl, I have always had bucket lists. I even still have bucket lists now. My mom used to joke and say, you cross one thing off and you add 3 more. And so I've always had a love for life.
Yeah.
So even in that darkest moment where for the first time I had come up with an entire plan of how I was going to end it all, it scared me, 1, and 2, I knew I needed to do something. So at this point, 6 therapists, no healing, nothing.
Yeah.
And I checked myself into mental health the next day. And whether you're a believer or not, I believe it was by the grace of God. I found a social worker that literally made me her priority.
Yeah.
And she completely changed my life around. And because of her, today I am a therapist. And she made me a priority in my healing and just working through that trauma, getting out of that horrible, toxic marriage.
Yeah.
And like I said, I didn't know marital rape was a thing,
Yeah.
Because that's your spouse and sex is just something that happens in relationships.
Right.
But it was so bad and I was in such a dark place that many nights or mornings I would just pretend to be asleep so that he wouldn't mess with me. But as I'm pretending to be asleep just so that he would leave me the heck alone, he would have sex with me. And minutes later, I would pretend to wake up and say, oh, what have you been doing? Or, you've been up for a while. And he literally would act like nothing ever occurred.
Wow.
And this happened several times, like weeks, on a weekly basis. And I didn't come to term or to realization that marital rape was a thing until years later. So this was probably 2009 going on until 2010. And I didn't get that confirmation that marital rape is a thing until probably 2018.
Yeah.
And so that was a whole nother trauma because whenever anyone talked about sexual assault, I just always went back to my first assault.
Right.
And then you start working through that, but then it wasn't until years later that you're like, oh, that wasn't the only time that I experienced this.
It happened more than once. But, luckily you were able to identify, and even if you weren't able to remedy that right away, you've gotten to where you've gotten now, and you are now helping others that have been through this before, which I want to walk through that journey. First, we need to take a quick break. We're going to be back here with Christy with more of her story, but first, some words from our sponsors, Mary and Martha House.
Mary and Martha House is a beacon of hope. For over 4 decades, it continues to shine brightly and illuminate the path towards a better future for countless women and families in need. Since our humble beginnings in 1982, we have dedicated ourselves wholeheartedly to the noble cause of helping those affected by domestic violence and homelessness. Did you know that every day in communities all around us, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 15 children face the terrifying reality of domestic violence? Compassion is the cornerstone of everything we do. We approach each person with a deep understanding of their unique struggles and needs. We foster an environment where respect and appreciation are not just words, but guiding principles that shape our interactions and relationships. Each member of our dedicated team is held to the highest standard, ensuring that compassion guides every aspect of our work. Mary and Martha House is a place where hope takes root, love blossoms, and lives are forever changed.
Please spread the word. Help raise awareness about Mary and Martha House by sharing their mission, success, stories, and upcoming events on social media. By amplifying their message, you can reach a wider audience and encourage others to get involved or make a donation. Please remember, even the smallest act of kindness can make a significant difference in the lives of those in need.
Welcome back to Break That Cycle. Joined here with Christy, you just went through your experience with sexual assault and spousal rape. And I'm glad you touched on that because you're absolutely right. It is not talked about enough. And it happens a lot. But for those who don't know how to identify that, we need to make that conversation a little more common. Because I'm sure there are a lot of people out there that are suffering from that and may not even know it.
Right.
So thank you for bringing that up and for talking about it. I would like to get into some of the healing.
Okay.
And when do you remember a time when you realized that you wanted to live differently?
When I started seeing that last therapist for the first session, because I feel like the night right before when I had a plan on how to end just my life, I knew that that's not what I wanted. I knew that I always had a love for life and living. And so if anything, that was probably like, the last straw.
Yeah.
And then seeing her and seeing just her dedication to my treatment and my healing, I started to feel a little bit of that hope and started to see a little bit of the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And I think that started my healing.
What did you think healing looked like in the beginning?
I honestly didn't know.
Yeah.
I knew that I was riddled with anxiety. I knew that I was depressed. I knew that I felt very hopeless and helpless, not purpose, or what am I continuing life for? So I knew I felt all those things.
Yeah.
So I knew that healing had to be something other than that. I remember what I felt like before the assaults happened, and I was always just a very happy-go-lucky young lady. I had a life for life, and I felt joyful just to be here. And that all shifted for me. So getting back to anything that remotely resembled enjoying life.
Now, when you were going through those thoughts and, maybe after you realized you had a problem, with the drinking, and then, of course, you went through a couple other stages that no one should ever have to go through. Did you at any point blame yourself?
Yes, I feel that as survivors, somewhere along the line, it's part of that healing or even just trauma. You start thinking, what could I have done differently? What if I would have told him no? You know better. You're always told as little kids, don't get in a ride with a stranger.
Right.
So I did go through those moments of what if, and I could have done differently.
Yeah.
So there is a stage, I feel, of guilt and almost trying to not justify what happened to you, but make an excuse as to why you were put in the situation that you were put in.
At what point did you realize that you weren't to blame for this?
Somewhere along my healing journey. And I think with that therapist, the social worker that I was seeing regularly, and I think it's very important to normalize that it doesn't matter what any of us do, don't do, what we're wearing, what we're not wearing. It is never our fault. And sadly, I have found that the more people that I have talked to that are also survivors of sexual assault, that is a common thought that's somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
It like rears its ugly head.
Yeah.
You could have done something differently. This is your fault. Society has a big role in victim blaming.
Yeah.
So just knowing that, no, you can be standing in a corner in a swimsuit and that still doesn't justify anybody touching you inappropriately.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If you wake up 15 minutes late and you're at work 15 minutes late, yes, that's your fault.
Right.
If you wake up late and somebody hits you and you end up being 15 minutes late, it's kind of not your fault. You got hit, you got rear-ended. The victim blaming is just, it's wild. It is ridiculous to think that you can blame somebody for someone else acting in such a horrific way towards them. Really, really gets on. I don't know if you can tell, it really gets under my skin, and it makes me angry.
Yeah.
And I think therapy, and I do want to get into your journey with therapy, but I think therapy allows people the option to say, you know what, I was an actor in this play, but what happened was not my fault. And I think until you're able to acknowledge that, those feelings of resentment for yourself are going to continue.
Right.
And if that continues, there's no chance at healing whatsoever. There's no chance at coping with the trauma or getting through the trauma. It's kind of like on the other side of, you'll never love anyone till you learn to love yourself. Right. I've heard that many times. It's kind of the opposite, an inverted idea of that sentence is that you can't fix your life until you forgive yourself.
Right.
And it's understanding that the trauma that happened to you was not your doing. Nobody forced you to force someone out. I mean, the whole thing is just ridiculous. Anyway, we need to get off. I digress, or else we'll be here all day for me just ranting. But once you were able to identify this, eventually that led to you wanting to be just like that counselor that reached out to you and said, hey, you're my number one priority and I got you.
Yep.
So what was that journey like for maybe those out there that are looking to get into the mental health, into the mental health sector? What does that journey look like?
So it's seeking out help, number one, but that looks different for everyone.
Okay.
I found this social worker. I ended that marriage. I continued on my healing journey. Then I met my now husband, Jesse. But once I stopped seeing her, then a couple years went by and I felt that, hey, I'm doing really good. Like there's no flashbacks. There's not anything going on, no nightmares. I had her first son and then I had her second, and it's cliche, but it's part of my story. That second pageant, when they said, hey, you need to make this your platform, being a voice for sexual assault victims. Well, for all these other years leading up to that pageant, I had kind of just think of taking a little box and just putting it up on the shelf. That's what I kind of did with my trauma, because the family still didn't know. I had gotten married again. We had 2 beautiful children. So I'm just trucking along with life and things are going well. But it's almost like that box got brought down and now we're opening it. So was I fully healed? No, in that moment I was not. I had started my healing journey with that social worker, but I didn't continue. That's just because military and moving. And then we got to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. My husband was still in. I went through 2 therapists there, but it was like 2 sessions and then I was done because the empathy and the compassion wasn't there and I just didn't want to put myself through that again.
Right.
So going through the second pageant and then making sexual assault my platform, that means that now this is right in my face
digging
again.
It back up.
And we're digging it back up.
Yeah.
So then I really realized I'm not done healing. My husband deployed.
Reality check.
Yep.
Game's not over.
Nope. Yeah. I'm still here. And I sometimes when I talk to people, I tell them your trauma is kind of like squatters. You have a house and you have squatters. And they're just kind of minding their own business and we're just trucking through life. But then you want to remodel in the house and the squatters are like, hey, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere.
That's really clever.
Yeah.
I like that.
So here I am wanting to compete in this pageant. Finally told my family about it. And then things all of a sudden just like started to progress. So now I'm having to reflect on what did happen to me.
Yeah.
And up until that point, I have felt a different range of emotions. But for the first time, the rage and anger that I felt due to the trauma that happened to me was something I never felt before. So I remember telling my husband, you need to get me a punching bag. You need to do something because this is eating me alive. And like I used to feel like my blood would boil. I would drop off my boys off at daycare and go home and just scream.
Wow.
And of course, you have little kids. So then it's time to pick them up. You got to suppress that. Husband's deploying, coming back. Like you just things have to get done. And so he did. He got me a punching bag, and I would drop the boys off at school, and I would go back home and go in my garage, and I would just go to town on that punching bag for at least an hour, and just started
Jeez.
to sweat and cry and yell, and just that was part of my healing as well.
Sure.
And until I started working through that and really having to think, okay, this did happen to me. I've acknowledged it. I'm facing it. You know, what does the future look like?
Yeah. Other than the anger, what other emotions were you going through at that time that you knew, that you could recognize?
The sadness was still there.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit of anxiety, because whenever my husband would deploy, you know, there's
Sure.
that anxiety of
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it's not just about me. Now it's me and these two little kids.
Yeah.
So definitely anxiety, depression, and then a lot of just that anger. If anything, that anger was the top emotion that I struggled with at that time.
Were you, years removed, years beyond, were you able to identify any other emotions retrospectively that you maybe did not identify at the time? And I ask this question because we know that when you're dealt trauma, you don't get rid of it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But you learn how to work through it,
Mm-hmm.
and you pick up you pick up little things along the way.
Right.
Every conversation that I have with somebody, when I share my story, I pick up something new.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same story every time, but it's, oh, wow, I didn't think about that. You know, and it kind of, that prompts me to, you know, maybe have a conversation with some of the ladies here at Mary Martha House, or have a conversation with my daughter and say, hey, I don't know if you've ever felt this way,
Right.
but da 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 da. Did you ever have that where, and especially rehashing all of that stuff all over again for the pageant competitions?
Mm-hmm.
Did you identify new emotions that you had that you didn't realize at first?
Grief was one of them, and that's tied into depression, but it was in a different realm, because when you start reflecting on what's happened to you, you know, when we're little kids, or even if you're just going through life and nothing significant has happened that's traumatic, you have hopes and dreams
Mm-hmm.
and goals for your life,
Mm-hmm.
and you start almost to envision how you see your future.
Yeah.
So never in my hopes or dreams, or me envisioning where I would be as a woman or as a mother or soldier, was there ever, oh, you're going to get raped.
Right.
So I had to grieve this version of myself
Wow.
going through life
Yeah.
without anything traumatic happen to me, you know, and I had to say goodbye to that girl.
Yeah.
And I feel that one of the things that was taken from me from the initial rape was trust. I used to trust
Sure.
everyone. I was 17, 18, just, you know,
The world's got my back.
the
We're
world is
good.
great. And
Yeah.
I'll, you know, look at, you know, give people the benefit of the doubt.
Sure.
And that day, trust in the world and humanity got taken from me.
Wow. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oof. I like that. That's not something that would come face value with that trauma, but it makes perfect sense that there is a piece of you that should have been that will never be.
Right.
And you know, it's not like scraping your knee.
Mm-hmm.
That'll heal. You won't see that,
Right.
unless you're me and you get rocks stuck in them. But you can heal that.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have something that is unhealable, is that a word?
We'll make it.
That's a very interesting point. And hopefully will make some people out there that are listening think twice about those types of situations, and doing the smart thing, and staying away from bad influences and things of that nature. That's something that you don't want to have to go through. That's a horrible thing, especially at that age.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you said, the hopes and dreams, and it'll never be the same.
No.
You know, it's tarnished, and that's wow.
Mm-hmm.
So when you finally had this opportunity to get this counselor, how long before you decided you wanted to make this your mission now to do the same for others?
I probably started seeing her in 2009, and it was roughly 9-10 years
Okay.
before because it wasn't until 2019 that I shared it with my family.
Right.
So here's 10 years later where I thought, okay, like I really have to heal from this. I don't want this to have any strongholds on me anymore. Like, this is my story.
Do you kind of feel like that was the last piece? And there may never be a last piece, but telling your story to your family is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you exacerbated it by 800,000 million by telling the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
But again, as you stated earlier, there is a sense of relief that comes with that.
Yes.
Being able to share your story. And if you're sharing it with the right people, obviously, don't share it with anybody that doesn't truly care for you, because that's useless. But do you feel that helped you transform as well? Getting that out?
Yes.
And getting the support?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it could go different, if the support's not there, or if you get met with, how could you let this happen to you?
Yeah.
We raise you differently. And you are absolutely right. Now I share my story with not just my family, but the world. And, it's sad to say this, but we live in a very broken world. I did a podcast.
You're doing other podcasts? Oh.
I guess it was less of a podcast and more it ended up being like a Facebook Live.
Yeah.
But the comments on there from some of the people.
God, I don't even want to know.
And I didn't even share that on any of my platforms, just because even though today I could sit here and tell you I'm like 98, 99% through my healing journey.
Yeah.
And I am very confident and secure with who I am and where I am today.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the lines are still things that are going to pop up.
Sure.
So when you put yourself out here like this, and then you have people saying, well, she's an idiot. Why did she let anyone go up into her room? And that's what she deserves. It stirs things up because it's almost like, how dare you?
Yeah.
And that goes back to the re-victimizing or the victim shaming of, why did you do this?
Yeah.
This is your fault. You caused this on yourself. And so we live in a very broken world where we just constantly continue to re-victimize these victims instead of saying, no, how dare that guy? You don't deserve this.
Yeah. I'll tell you why, because it's easy. It's the easy way out. And the internet gangsters, they run rampant. And probably half of those comments came from 11-year-olds. I mean, you don't know.
I know.
You don't know who they came from. You can't validate. And it's, look at the source.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it still sucks.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to hear you're 98, 99% through your healing journey, which is fantastic. I don't know that I'm quite there. I feel like I'm coming up on your heels a little bit.
Okay.
I'd probably be in that 90% range. Things are going really good for me these days. Of course, you always have your dips.
Yeah.
You always have your slide backs,
Yes.
Your setbacks.
Yep.
What would you say to somebody who struggles with the idea of ever feeling whole again? Because when you're in the middle of that trauma, obviously you're in a tunnel or an underground layer or a box with no windows, whatever your confinement looks like. Everyone has that feeling of confinement and the inability to break free and to breathe again. What do you say to somebody who's going through that, specifically through a sexual assault or spousal rape scenario, and they just want to feel whole again?
One of the first things that I would say is that you're not alone.
Yeah.
And I know that might sound cliche, but when we are in the middle of the abuse or just coming out of experience of sexual assault or rape, you think that you're the only one in the world that's going through this. And sadly enough, there's not as much resources out there as there should be.
Yeah.
You can do all the initial things, and there are organizations and programs that help you deal with the initial impact of that trauma, but then what happens afterwards?
Yeah.
And I think that that's when it really hits victims the hardest, because it's like, I did everything I was told I was supposed to do. In my case, I got the rape kits done at the hospital. I went to law enforcement, But then what happens when my world started unraveling? And so you're not alone. Seek out services, seek out resources. There's not as many as there should be, but there are some out there. You don't have to walk through this alone. And even if you're not in a place to share it with family members or loved ones, there are organizations that will walk alongside you and take every step with you so that you are not on this healing journey by yourself.
Yeah. And I think therapy and counseling play a lot into that. I can't even count how many times I've heard someone say, "Oh, I've tried therapy, it didn't work." Once. And that's the first question I ask. How many therapists have you went to? Oh, just one. Didn't work. Not for me. What advice would you give to somebody trying to find a real connection out there with a therapist or a counselor? Because I'm sure you have people in your practice that you just don't you don't gel with.
Yeah.
And you've actually expressed to me that there are certain cases that you will not take because that is not your specialty.
Right.
You are not going to give the best education and the best help to this person because you're not dealing with in their realm.
Right.
Which I think is brilliant. You're not just out there to grab money. You're going to be totally upfront and honest with people. If I can help you, I will.
Right.
But even with those cases, I'm sure you have times where you just can't really gel with somebody, whether it be not wanting to give all the information, not being very truthful. What are some things that you think potential patients should look out for when they're going out to seek therapy or counseling?
So for potential clients out there, or anyone that's never done therapy, I would say be your biggest advocate. You know what's holding you back or the things that are in place that you no longer want to live like that anymore. When you come in contact with a therapist, they don't know what those are. And sometimes with therapy, we might not share everything from the very beginning, but you have an idea of what you want your life moving forward to look like. So be your own advocate. Every therapist is not a one size fits all. If one doesn't work for you, then go find someone else. Because there is a therapist out there that will make you their priority and will help you with those challenging moments or traumas that you've been through. And they want to help you on your healing journey.
Yeah. I'm going to dumb it down to a pair of pants. Not all pants are going to fit you,
No.
but there are pants out there that will fit you. Yeah, and I can't wait to read the comments about that. No, we'll stay away from the comments. So, all right. And then lastly on this topic, because I do want to get into your nonprofit, Voices Against Sexual Assault, which I've just recently learned to know and to love already. And I'm already working out wearing heels for your fundraiser. That'll be coming up. Not in a weird way. We'll explain it later. But lastly, what would you say to somebody who's just scared to go see a therapist and to go seek help for whatever? I mean, should they identify the reason why they're scared to do that? Or is it all just kind of relate back to one single trauma?
No, so that's a very common fear, but just know that whenever you do go see a therapist, everything that you share with that therapist is confidential. So I know that with assault or rape or domestic violence, a lot of that fear is what if it gets back to, the predator.
Right.
And so just know that when you sit in that chair with that therapist, anything that you share with them, there's a confidentiality clause.
Yeah.
And it's not going to get back to family members or friends or loved ones. So if that gives anyone any kind of comfort, speaking to a complete stranger is scary.
Yeah.
Because now you are asked to be vulnerable and have those hard conversations. But if you want to flip that, at the same time, that's a complete stranger. So you don't know this person. You might never see this person other than therapy sessions again. Just being open with them and knowing that, hey, I only see them in a setting.
Meeting a new therapist is like an Olympic event for me. I get so much enjoy because I'll just unleash and just everything I got. And I like to see their reaction, whether they're like, okay, we'll do this again next week, maybe. Or if they're just, they just power on through it. It's like, okay, I kind of respect that. I think we're going to get along. Not every therapist I went to has been good for me.
Right.
Maybe good for other people, but for me, we just didn't gel. Yeah. There wasn't that connection there. And I think that's really important. And if nothing else, I would want people to understand that you may have to try two or three different therapists, or maybe even more.
Yes.
How many did you go through?
7.
You went through
Lucky
7.
number 7.
So, and sometimes it just takes that persistence and perseverance. But I think, having that hope of being able to breathe again is very important. And this is a method to where you can get to that.
Absolutely.
Again, I want to get to voices. So we're going to take one more break. And on the other side, Christy is going to tell us all about voices against sexual assault. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Break That Cycle. We are going to talk about voices against sexual assault. Christy, you started V.O.I.C.E.S in 2019.
Yes.
Right? What led to you taking that large leap of creating something like this?
So we talked about the pageant and it becoming my platform. So that was step 1. And then from there, after telling my family, I did a Facebook Live and just kind of shared my story publicly.
Oh, cool.
Back then we were in North Carolina, and when all that was happening, I feel like everything started happening together. I went to the pageant, I competed, I won, and then all of a sudden I start getting women from church asking, when are you going to do a support group? When are you going to do a support group?
Yeah.
A nonprofit was never anything that was on my bucket list.
You had to add it though. Yeah.
I had to add it. And again, I am a believer, and I feel that God placed that on my heart to start a nonprofit. And my husband was deployed, and I kind of just Googled my way through the articles of incorporation and what it all took. And he got back, and we have founded a nonprofit.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And you Googled. So you had to put in some effort.
Lots of effort.
Right now we could just AI that.
Yes.
And it comes out in 2 seconds. You had to put the effort.
I had to put the effort and figure out what that even looked like.
Did you ever yell at your kids for using Google and not looking through textbooks or anything? Like doing natural research?
But
okay. Yeah. I remember having conversations. It's like, you can't use Google. You have to actually read the book.
Encyclopedia.
Coming from someone who never read the book. So very much a hypocrite.
Yeah.
Okay. So what type of support did you get once all these ladies wanting this support group and you're like, okay, hey, I'm here. What kind of support came in after that?
We started the support group a couple months before COVID hit in 2020. And then, so that was a little bit of a challenge. Through the nonprofit, my husband came back. It was very supportive. Everyone was glad that we had established this nonprofit.
Sure.
But then we would meet in person weekly. And once COVID hit, everyone isolates. And we were in North Carolina, which isolation was even bigger. But due to confidentiality and the sensitive nature of talking about sexual assault, I pretty much just asked the ladies, are you all okay with us continuing to meet? So through that first year of COVID, we continued to meet weekly in person. We would have our Lysol and our face mask. And
wait, you guys weren't sharing cups and cookies and stuff?
I know.
No? Everyone got their own snack pack?
Yep.
Individual snack?
Yes. And so that's what they needed.
Yeah.
And I just didn't want to compromise their healing journey.
Yeah.
Some of these women, it had been 40 years that they had been holding on to the secret.
Wow.
And I was the first person that they ever told.
Wow.
So as the nonprofit, I founded the nonprofit, and this support group is going on. And now I'm hearing and supporting other women through their healing journey.
Yeah.
That also played a factor in my continued healing journey.
Yeah.
Because now you do have a group of women that have all experienced this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very empowering to see different individuals on their journey.
Yeah. That's funny you bring that up. And I have a feeling we're going to hear this a lot throughout the entire first season that we have. On our first episode with Heath, who we talked about what sort of relief and just sense of calmness and a little bit of peace that you feel sharing your story and hearing other people share their story. And it's funny because usually when you share stories with people, regular stories, not traumatic stories, you're always trying to outdo the other person. Like, oh yeah, well, I caught the fish that was this big.
Yeah.
And so you can still kind of have a little bit at times of competition, but it's not mean-spirited at all.
Right.
It's almost a little empowering to hear other people's stories because because again, we know that we're not the only person going through it. And that does help with our just wrapping our head around it. So you make it through COVID, and then you move down to Florida a few years later.
Yep. 21.
You've already established voices, but you're helping more than just people where you're at.
Right.
You're meeting them where they're at.
100%.
How difficult is that?
For me, I would say it's not.
Yeah.
Even as I was going through my master's program, I felt that all my peers, when they talk about modalities and what your, preferred method is, everyone would select one and that's what they would stick with. And I remember feeling like, all right, I think I'm missing something here, and having conversations with my professors of, I feel that meeting clients where they're at, I'm going to have a different treatment plan every time. And they said, no, Christy, you're actually ahead of the game because you do have to meet clients where they're at. So I don't know if that's part of my own healing and all the things that I've seen personally. And then I just incorporate that. But our program on the nonprofit is streamlined. However, we could get on a weekly support group session with an agenda and notice that our ladies are needing something else, and we'll just take a detour and meet them where they're at, because that need needs to be met before we continue on. Yeah.
And so your meetings with the ladies, you have a 10-week program.
Yes.
Explain a little bit about your 10-week program.
We meet with our participants weekly for a weekly support group, and that's either virtually or in person. And then during those 10 weeks, they get 5 individual therapy sessions with myself. And they also get 5 individual life coaching sessions with our life coach, Emma Martin. At the end of the 10 weeks, we concluded with a 4-day Healing Voices retreat. And that's no cost to our participants. We usually get a house and Airbnb locally, and then we house them, we feed them. And during those 4 days, we do a lot of movement, yoga, workshops, discuss communication, boundaries, and just continue to pour into them as they continue on their healing path.
Yeah. And so obviously we can't fix the world in 10 weeks.
No.
So what types of tools do you give these ladies coming out of that retreat and wrapping up the 10 weeks that they're able to take along with them for the rest of the journey?
Throughout, we get real clear on boundaries and implementing boundaries.
Yeah.
We talk about effective communications. We give them little prompts that they could start using, whether it's with their spouse or significant other, children, just so that they are able to feel confident in just their day-to-day life.
Sure.
We give them, when they start working with Emma, they work on what the future looks like, those values, those hope, so that that purpose starts coming back into their life. And the program doesn't just end at the 10 weeks. After they attend our 10-week program, we still stay in touch with the ladies, but then also 6 to 9 months afterwards, we do a couples retreat. So if our participants are married, they're able to come to a 4-day couples retreat with their spouse. And there we educate the spouse on, this is what trauma looks like.
Yeah.
This is why your spouse has been reacting the way that they have for so many years. And it's essentially to give them kind of a reset, but also the spouse to understand from their perspective why they might be having these challenges in the marriage.
No, that's a very real thing. And I think that's brilliant that you do that. It's a team effort.
Yes.
When you're in a relationship like that, and obviously the kids come along with it too, if there's kids involved, there's things that are going to happen that the spouse is not going to be able to explain. And now having that knowledge, well, maybe we need to go a different route, or whatever the case is. What are some success stories you have?
We have had one lady, when she started going through the program, she was in a abusive relationship, so much to the point that he was poisoning her with her food. And about halfway through our program, just that empowerment that we give the ladies and that encouragement and support,
Yeah.
she started seeing that there is hope outside of this
Oh.
no end relationship.
Yeah.
And she was able to just pack up her house and completely separate and move away from him.
Yeah.
We have another one of our participants that she went through our program. And we always encourage the ladies, if you go through this program and you have found it that it's been healing and impactful for you, how do you turn around and give back to the nonprofit?
Right.
And whether that's them coming back as a team lead, so the next time we have a retreat, they're just there with the ladies.
Oh, cool.
And, hey, we got to stay on track or take a break. But she is now our photographer for our nonprofit.
Nice.
And just being able to use like her God-given skills, which is photography.
Yeah.
And so that's her way of giving back.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. It's nice that you roped that in to, and to kind of just keep that mission alive.
Yeah.
While it may not be in your walls, it's still out there and it's roaming the world. And now they have a story to tell someone else who may benefit from services that V.O.I.C.E.S offers, which is fantastic. We always love success stories, but I'm sure that there are some stories that don't end as well as you would like them to end.
Right.
What would you say to somebody who may be a little hesitant to try a 10-week program? And how would you calm their fears or anxieties about opening up to not just two different people, and then opening up to a group, going, albeit going through the same things, but still that's scary.
It is scary.
What kind of advice would you give to someone that may be a little hesitant, but why should they go through your 10-week program?
To get back to their true north, to get back to the core of who they are.
Yeah.
We all have that core of who we are before we experience trauma. And then we experience these bad things that happen to us. And it's almost like our life gets shaken and maybe we go off track with our values or our purpose. So it is scary.
Yeah.
And it is hard to open up, especially to strangers, to myself, to Emma. One of the ways that I operate in this nonprofit and with our participants is I'm very transparent. I'm not just sitting on this couch telling you X, Y, and Z, and this is what you need to do, and this is what you should do. Any kind of activity, exercise, homework that I give the participants, I have personally done it.
You've done,
somewhere along my journey. It's not, this is a new hype and I read about it, so it should work. So I'm constantly instilling in them, like, you're not alone. We are here for you. It is going to get harder before it gets better.
Sure.
And I don't say that to scare them, but I say them because how long have they been this little box that they've put up on the top of the shelf? And now we're cracking open the box and we're addressing the trauma.
Yeah.
So something that you might have not thought about for years, now it's in your face again.
No, that's important to bring up because that's not said enough.
No.
And like we were talking about earlier, most people think that they just go see a therapist or see a mental health counselor and you just flick the switch and I'm all better now.
Right.
And it doesn't work that way.
No.
As we know, trauma stays with you and it's going to come back.
Yeah.
It will repeat itself a few times in your lifetime. That is almost a guarantee.
Right.
Ooh, we love quick satisfaction these days, right?
Yes,
we want everything
gratification.
instant gratification. We need it done now. And it doesn't work that way.
No.
And so it is important to tell people that are going into that program or in any type of therapy or counseling session, it is going to get worse before it gets better.
Yes.
But when it does get better, it's going to be better than you could ever imagine.
Right.
Have you struggled with that with clients, either for your for-profit or with V.O.I.C.E.S, to where it's really hard to keep them motivated to move forward?
Sometimes, yes. I have seen clients on both sides where they get to a wall and they see that it's being effective and we're stirring things inside of them that haven't been for a long time. For example, our most recent retreat, one of our ladies had gone all the way through the 10-week program. Now at the retreat, we get a house. All these women, whether they're virtual or in person, they're together for 4 days.
Yeah.
And our virtual and our in-person ladies don't meet each other until the retreat. So a lot of different personalities, a lot of different things, everyone has their different beliefs. And so one of our participants, the last day there, that morning, she sat with me and Emma, and she wanted to go and she wanted to leave. And in that moment, her mind was telling her staying and pushing through was going to be more detrimental.
Right.
Emma and I knew that that wasn't the case, but we always revert back to our patterns.
Right.
And if your pattern is running when things get difficult or you're being challenged, then now things that have come up, you're going to go back to that because that's your safety.
Right.
And so we completely get that. She ended up not leaving and staying through. And
Good.
she is one of our biggest, supporters. And just, she came back to me at the end of the day and said, Christy, I'm glad that I didn't leave.
Good.
So we know how to support them. And we always tell them, trust yourself, but also trust us and trust the process.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. And I'm glad that there are people out there that are, again, supporting and, either going through the program or not, but also supporting. And we want to know, how can we support V.O.I.C.E.S? I joked earlier about the calf workouts that I'm doing. I lied. I haven't been doing any. I'm lazy. I'm just gonna wing it. So, but you have a really cool fundraiser that you do. You will be your second fundraiser, and it's a really cool concept. Go ahead and explain it.
So the first Saturday in October, we do our Walk a Mile in Her Shoes fundraising event. And so Walk a Mile is actually an international program and fundraiser for sexual assault and domestic violence. And so the concept is, the fun part of it is that men get to walk a mile in heels.
Did you say get to walk? That seems like a jail sentence to me.
Get to walk. Yep. You'll get to walk a mile in heels.
Yes. And it's a literal and a figurative message.
Yeah.
But anytime you can incorporate a fun event like that and get your message out and get more of the awareness out like that is obviously a great thing. What other ways can people support V.O.I.C.E.S?
Word of mouth is huge. Spread the word. We are a resource. And when I mentioned earlier, there are limited resources. We are one of those resources that want to help fill the gap.
Sure.
So if you know someone that's been affected by sexual assault, and it's not just women, we've been talking a lot about my journey, through this, but men are affected too.
Sure.
And we are getting ready to launch our Men's Healing Voices group.
Nice.
And that starts April 21st.
Yeah. And
their group is going to be 10 weeks as well, their program. And then our goal is to launch a children's Healing Voices program this summer.
Yeah.
I wish people could put me out of business and there wasn't a need.
Yeah.
But that's not the world that we live in.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Same. It was actually a joke that Heath and I had when we spoke was we'd love to put ourselves out of jobs.
Yeah.
And I think things like this, creating more awareness in any way possible, however you can create awareness, is going to be important with getting that message across. Because and on both sides, both the victim side and the support side.
Right.
People don't know what they've went through until they have that knowledge. But on the other side, people don't know how to support it until they know that there's places like V.O.I.C.E.S that are out there. Your fundraiser last year you did in Apollo Beach, correct?
Yes, we did in Apollo Beach.
It's same venue for this year?
Yep, we'll do it at Lakeside and Waterset.
Okay.
That's a mile loop that we've, timed
You have
out.
to walk a mile?
It's a mile.
Like a whole mile?
A whole mile.
Are there like rest stops?
I mean, you could stop if you want.
I mean, I'm going to have to. It's not going to be by choice. It's just, I'm just going to fall over at some point, but I'm game. I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah. And our fundraisers are big. I don't think I've mentioned through this, our entire program, whether it's the women's or the men's that we're kicking off or the future children, like these are free services that we provide for our victims.
Yeah.
I personally feel that they've paid the ultimate price already.
Yeah.
And so all the participants that go through our program, it's at no cost to them at all.
I love that.
So anything that the community or anyone listening, if you feel a calling or tugging at your heart, whether it's $5 or $2,500, we encourage you to just donate, because that just allows us to continue to reach more victims and help them through their healing journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you see V.O.I.C.E.S going in the future? What's on your whiteboard for V.O.I.C.E.S?
Right now we have a small little office. So on my dream board for V.O.I.C.E.S, I would love to get a bigger facility, a house, something where that we are able to have these bigger support groups, be able to run multiple programs at once.
Sure.
You know, right now we are servicing Hillsborough and Pasco, and we've even had participants from PA.
Wow.
So even though this isn't a national program, who am I to say I can't help you?
Sure. No.
And so we just continuing to grow, continuing to impact those that feel that they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel right now.
Yeah.
And we will be the voice for them until they find their own voice. And just our slogan in the nonprofit is there's power in your story. And I wholeheartedly believe that, because your story has the potential to impact someone else, and it causes that ripple effect.
Well, I want to thank you very much for taking time out of your day to come sit here and talk with us. I think it's been very beneficial for those who know about you or don't know about you and want to support you, but also for those who are battling with this. And it could be, and it could have been something that happened 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Yes.
But if it's not dealt with, it's going to stay there and it's going to continue to fester. I love your advice for people who are scared to try and go the therapy route or that counseling route. It is so important. It cannot be said enough. And unfortunately, it's not said enough.
No.
But we appreciate you coming here to say it as much as you can, so that hopefully we can help some people that are hurting.
Thanks, Bill, for having me on.
Thank you for watching another episode of Break That Cycle. Also, big thanks to Christy and Voices Against Sexual Assault for giving us some information on their nonprofit. As we move on from here, keep learning, keep growing, and remember to keep breaking that cycle. We'll see you next time.